Hello, wonderful orientation to the teaching profession class. I hope you had a fabulous weekend and had a chance to get out and enjoy some, God, it was just beautiful. It made me actually yearn for summer, to enjoy this beautiful weather. And I hope that, let's see here, the readings are going well. We're going to have a really full class on Wednesday. So I wanted to go ahead and read something that I don't, anyway, something that I really was important to include in class. And like I said, we have such a packed class on Wednesday that I wanted to read it to you now. But this is, and if you're not familiar with the work of Jonathan Kozol, go ahead and look him up. He was, he went to Harvard and then was a Rhodes Scholar and then came back and started teaching in the Boston Public Schools and was appalled by the state in which he found the schools and the different experiences that children in wealthy areas received in education than high poverty areas. He has a number of books out there. I'll remember hopefully to bring him to class on Wednesday, but I just wanted to read you something. This is from his Letters to a Young Teacher, and there was a new teacher, her name's Francesca, and she started writing him, and this is the correspondence that came from that relationship. So let me just read a little bit about establishing the chemistry. First days in the classroom. Dear Francesca, you asked me how I felt the first day that I ever taught within a public school. The truthful answer is that I was terrified, even more than you were, I suspect, because I'd had no preparation as a teacher. I had gone to Harvard College where I was a literature major and then had studied briefly as a Rhodes Scholar in England and had lived in Paris where I'd studied in the writing of the company of older writers who were living there. When I came back to the United States and decided I would like to teach in a public school, I knew nothing about teaching and had never had a class in education. But my lack of qualifications didn't seem to matter to officials in the Boston public schools who were so desperate to hire almost anyone who would agree to teach in one of Boston's poorest neighborhoods that my application was approved without much questioning. My school was a ghostly-looking, badly overcrowded, and physically decrepit building where my students couldn't even be provided with a classroom of their own. We had to share an undivided auditorium with 35 other children in another fourth-grade class with a choral group and sewing class. One windy afternoon that fall, a rotted frame of windows in our makeshift class collapsed. I was standing close enough to catch the frame before the glass could shatter on the children sitting just beneath it. Some of the children seemed to have accepted these conditions, or, at least, did not appear to feel they had the right to question them. Others did not suffer these indignities so passively, but seemed to simmer with hostility toward many of the teachers and the principal. When the anger of these kids erupted, they were taken to the basement of the school, where the whippings were administered by an older teacher. In the spring, the principal assigned me to another fourth-grade class that had a classroom of its own, but was in even worse condition than the class in which I had begun, because the children in that room had had a string of substitute teachers almost the entire year. In the course of the preceding months, 12 different teachers had appeared and disappeared. As you can imagine, I began my first day with those children with the deepest trepidation. I knew how angry and distrustful they'd become, rightfully so, in view of all the damage that the school had done to them by now. But I also knew it was essential for me to suppress self-doubts. The self-doubts I was feeling and do anything I could contrive to give the kids the confidence that a new beginning had been made. It wasn't easy at the start. I literally had to shout the children down during the first few days in order to be heard. I think they were shocked by this because I'd worked with some of them in small groups earlier that year, and they'd never heard me raise my voice like that before. Once the class calmed down a bit, I sat on my desk and made a promise to the children. I told them they would not be abandoned. I told them I was there to stay. I don't know why it is that they believed me. They had no reason to accept such promises from yet another teacher. I do know that, from that point on, I did my damnedest to exploit every bit of personal theatricality I had at my disposal in order to infuse that room with energy and, as best I could, with the exhilaration that might bring some smiles to the very sullen faces that had come to be their adaptation to conditions that most children, rich or poor, in any school or district, would have found unbearable. Francesca, I don't want you to imagine that I was immediately successful. There are too many stories about super teachers who walk into hopeless situations and work instant miracles. Those stories make good movies, but don't often happen in real life. And I know that, in my own case anyway, I did not work any miracles that spring. Some of the kids remained resistant to me for a long, long time. And there were two or three who never really opened up to me until the last weeks of the year. But I did discover, and I still don't understand the chemistry that made this happen, that most of the children seemed to trust me. And one reason for this, I believe, is that they could see I did not condemn them for the chaos and confusion they'd been through, because I told them flatly that they had been treated in a way that I thought unforgivable. Then, too, because I always had a tendency to say exactly what I think to children, but to do it in a way that isn't too discouraging and gloomy, trying always to extract some kind of humor or sense of absurdity out of a situation that appears like an impossible calamity, I think most of the children actually got to like me, which, as in the case of almost any first-year teacher, is the kind of unexpected blessing we pray for. Start out tough and stick to the prescribed curriculum, new teachers are too frequently advised. This, in my belief, is the worst possible advice. Establishing a chemistry of trust between the children and ourselves is a great deal more important than to charge into the next 3 chapters of the social studies text or package reading system we have been provided, the same one that was used without success by previous instructors and to which the children are anesthetized by now. Entrap them in fascination, entrap them in a sense of merriment and hopeful expectations. When I walked into your class last week for the first time, you were sitting in that old black rocking chair surrounded by your students who were gathered on the reading rug, some of them with knees scrunched up in front of them, others lying on their stomachs, leaning on their elbows. You said that most of them at that point couldn't read or write more than about a dozen words, but you were slowly turning the pages of a word and picture book you told me you had loved since you were a child, and you were reading the story to them in that special voice you have which seems to make each sentence sound like something irresistibly delectable. I saw you give a few quick looks to one of your whisperers and squirmers who was finding it extremely hard to pay attention, but you never let your voice turn cold, and your eyes and those of that restless child met each other in that very candid way that seems to say, "Okay, we understand each other now. Back to the story." The children had known you only for a month, but the chemistry had already set in. No curriculum, no rules, no list of standards, no externally established regimens, however good or wise they may appear to some, can substitute for this. That bond of trust and tenderness comes first. Without that, everything is merely dutiful and generally deadening. It is not for dutiful aridity that people who love children become teachers. So, on that note, I'll see you in a couple of days.